one woman like grabs my heel and unclips me from the bike, and I get up and they're like looking around, frantically looking through the table, and they've kind of got nothing. They have watermelon, they have some other stuff, and she has a shaker of salt. And she's like, I have this. She's so proud. And I just like unscrew the top off the salt shaker, like knock it back, throw a little over my shoulder, and I go.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, is the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and arguably the hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country.
That's right, Hottie. It's for sure about the Leadville Trail 100, but it's definitely not just for the Leadville 100. It's for anyone who is interested in endurance racing at all. I think they're going to find some useful stuff in this episode and in the podcast in general.
Yeah, good point. I mean, anytime you hear the word Leadville in this show, just do a mental search and replace that word Leadville with whatever event you have in your plans.
Sure. What your qualifier, or a big race like Breck Epic or the Crusher and the Tusher that you and I are both doing. There's definitely a lot of big races out there, and what you learn here can apply.
In this episode, the endurance racer's worst enemy, Cramps. The dash for the Leadville City Limits is our course segment, and trainer road coach Jonathan Lee's Leadville-specific intervals will be so hard, you just may find yourself putting some of our cramp remedies to an early test. I'm Michael Houghton. Some people call me Hottie. But if you heard our first show, I have begun a campaign for a new nickname. It is 6546. 54. That's for 6-time attendee, 5-time starter, 4-time finisher of the Leadville Trail 100. Here with me is Mr. 22-21-20, Eldon Fatty Nelson, who is planning for his 22nd Leadville Trail 100. He started 21 times, finished 20 of them. Fatty, you have the 2,000-mile buckle. There's only 8 of you that have that serving plate size buckle. I imagine a good-sized turkey dinner fits on that buckle. Do you all know each other? And is there like a fraternity of the 2,000-milers?
Well, maybe a Cornish game hen would fit on that, but it's not quite as big as a turkey. But I do know all of them by name and face, but I think I probably know Ricky McDonald the best of the group. He is the Colorado firefighter who rides this beat-up Clark Kent in the same tires every year. Not everyone knows this, but he gets the race plate 666 every time he races. And personally, I am way too superstitious for that. I did get the number 69 for my race plate once, though.
I'm going to leave that little factoid right there.
I'm just saying it because it meant that I was the previous year in 69th place overall, and I'm pretty proud of that. Of course, that was way before there were thousands of racers. Even so, that high of a place is the best I've ever done.
Okay. Let's talk about something else. Anything else?
How about if we talk about our sponsor, Shimano?
Oh, love Shimano. Did you see Shimano came out with their new XTR, the new iteration of XTR late last week?
I did, and I've been drooling over it, and the whole 12-speed thing is pretty intriguing, but I'm happily sticking with XTDI2 for both my hardtail as well as for my full suspension mountain bike. I made a decision a while ago. I'd rather have 11 speeds and this super perfect, fast, easy shifting than 12 speeds.
Leadville, 106 mile. How often do you think you shift in the race?
That is a great question, actually. I would love it if Shimano would automatically keep track every time I shift. That would be an interesting stat. I do know that it is easier for me to shift, and because it's easier, I shift more often. With my old setup, a more mechanical trigger shifter, I would sometimes skip shifting when I was tired and the throw just took more energy than I was willing to deal with, or I was already in a climb and there was a chance that the shift wouldn't work and I'd just be stuck between gears and grinding away. Now, with XTDI2, I shift all the time. You mentioned that before, that when you were riding with DI2, that you were shifting just for the fun of it practically. Mm-hmm. But anytime I have an inkling I would like a different gear, I don't even think about it. It's just automatic. It's close to having an automatic drivetrain. I doubt I go more than a minute without shifting. Lisa's the same way, perhaps even more so. It's just so easy to shift anytime you need, and it's super easy to go all the way up or down the cassette just with a single press, and your cassette, just all the way up, all the way down. No, not even thinking about it. So you were asking about XTR. I'm not saying it isn't awesome. I'm sure that at some point I will be overcome with a need for it. But for right now, for what I can afford and what I love doing, XTDI2 is still a pretty perfect choice for a person like me, and that is an endurance mountain bike racer.
To find out more, go to bike.shimano.com. We will also have a link in the show notes for this episode at Leadville100podcast.com. And now onto the course, the Leadville course. Each week we will discuss a segment of the Leadville Out and Back format. We'll do this in order. So as you're listening to episodes, you're going to get the Leadville course broken down in order, including the return to town. We're going to tackle those segments as well, I should say. Whether you're new to the race or you've messed it up in the past, you're going to find answers here. If you have questions about the course or criticisms of our takes, I imagine you do, leave them on our website, Leadville100podcast.com. You can tweet them with the hashtag Leadville100podcast, or text or leave us a voicemail at 719, that is the Leadville area code, 453-1514. In show number 1, we detailed the start line scene. Now, the anthem has been performed, and it's time for the countdown, the shotgun blast, and the roll out of town. And Fatty, this is no neutral start. I always tell first-timers to be ready for what is essentially a criterium on nobbies.
Yeah, it is theoretically supposed to be a neutral start, but in all the years I've done this race, with all the thousands of racers all around me, I have crashed a total of 4 times, and one of those times was 10 seconds into this race right at the beginning. Some guy wearing headphones at the beginning, listening to music, if you can believe it, surged from behind, hit my handlebars from behind, sent me down onto the pavement. I picked myself up, adrenaline everywhere, saw both my water bottles rolling down the hill away from me, and I'm chasing those. It was like trying to catch a couple of cats during a running of the bulls. And then in the middle of all this mess, I had to remount my bike while people are riding around me. Luckily, the bike was not damaged, and I wasn't too badly hurt, just really freaked out, and I rejoined the race. Now, without question, there are 3 parts of this race that scare me. And the first 6.1 miles from the starting line to the base of the St. Kevin's climb, which is the section we're going to talk about in this episode of the course, is right there at the top. Everyone's together. Everyone is loaded with adrenaline. There's a lot of jockeying for position from the people who are starting at the back but feel like they belong in the front. And there are some legitimate reasons for some people to want to move forward, because the next section is a big uphill funnel. In other words, this is a strategically important first 6-mile segment, and it is a crowded madhouse. I feel like I'm making this out to be scarier and worse than it is, but it is something that you really do have to pay attention. You have to really be focused for this part of the race.
Mm-hmm. In 2014, there was a tree laying down on 6th Street, covering about half the road, and they just didn't have they didn't have time to pick that up. The riders simply had to swerve around that thing. The other thing is people are cold, so they're shivering. So in addition to being nervous, they're shivering because they're trying to go with as least amount of clothing as possible. And we're talking about a descent start, so it's maybe 38 or 40 at the start line, and you start going 35 miles an hour, and suddenly with the windshield, everybody's shivering, their elbows are out, so it's kind of a crazy little scene. What we're going to do is let's break down this part of the course into these 7 top things you should know between the starting line and the first climb, St. Kevin's. Now, number 1, in my book, when the gun goes off, the first thing that happens is nothing. Well, nothing if you are in corrals, I would say behind red. So it goes gold, silver, red, and then I guess they have green this year, purple, so on and so forth. If you're behind red and you hear whoever fires the shotgun now, it's not Ken anymore, go off, you'll have your one foot clicked in and the other foot on the ground, and you will probably sit there and wait for the mass in front of you to clear out under the start-finish banner. And eventually you will start moving. Slowly, but you'll start moving.
Yeah. And I use that countdown actually as my signal to hit the start button on my GPS. Depending on how far back you are, you could be waiting for 5 seconds to well more than a minute, for a couple of minutes. Now, I last year finished with an 8 hours and 31 minute finish time, which is, for most people, really good. You know, that would be the race of a lifetime for many people. That puts me in the green corral, which is 4 corrals back, and very likely I'm picturing that I will be on the opposite side, on the far side, down Harrison, which means that it's going to, even with a pretty fast finish time, I will be waiting at least a minute. People who have never done the race before, you should be expecting a couple of minutes before you really clip in and get going.
But don't worry. I mean, your time is based on your chip time, and your time will not start until you cross under the start-finish banner. So even though you're nervous, you're like, come on, want to go, don't worry. The clock doesn't start until there is a shotgun time, and that's the timer everyone sees up at the start-finish line. But your time doesn't start until you cross under that start-finish banner. So here's number 2. Be confident or get on the wheel of someone who is or looks like they're confident. This comes down to, for me, experience. I mean, for the folks who have not been at a criterium on the road, I've actually advised people to jump in group rides, even on their mountain bike at times, to try and get a feel for what this is about. Because as you roll out of town, you are kind of wheel to wheel, elbow to elbow. And so it's good to find either someone who, find a confident wheel, or find somebody who looks like they know what they're doing, or have a buddy up with somebody. So if you have a partner and they're predictable and you know what they're going to do in a pack, that's great. I like to find a soft spot as I roll out of town. In other words, I like to move into an area where I feel like maybe there's a little more space, like where the riders have not decided to clog up as much. So find those little soft spots as you start to roll out of town, and it'll give you a little more space to react if something does happen, if that water bottle does fall on the ground. Again, like we talked about, it's cold. People are going to be shivering. People are going to be really nervous.
Yep. And people are also going to be aggressive in this first part of the course. There's no changing that. There are going to be people who are going to be trying to get around you. Maybe there are people who are moving side to side, looking for a great line. So don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution. Hold your line, read the crowd, don't be skittish or erratic yourself. And if you're not a strong, big, assertive rider, just tuck in behind someone who is. In my neck of the woods, we call those riders our meat plows. If you can get on the wheel of someone like that, someone who is big and strong and confident looking in a big downhill, as that person goes by you, tuck in. They can make your first 6 miles much faster and safer.
Number 3 now. Watch out for the accordion effect. This goes back to the road racing element we're talking about. And Leadville starts off like kind of a manic road race. Everyone wants to charge out of the gate. And you start downhill on pavement for at least a few hundred feet, picking up steam as you go along. But then the road turns a little uphill. In fact, pretty good little push uphill where you get those first deep breaths.
Yep, it's a good kicker.
As you go uphill, everyone ahead of you slows down. If you're more than 200 or 300 people back, this means you're going to see and hear braking well before you get to that little uphill kicker. So be ready for that.
That's right. I've seen people lock up and very narrowly avoid going down in this section, and it's sad because it's totally unnecessary. It's easy to fixate on the wheel, the one wheel a foot and a half ahead of you, instead of keeping your eyes open for the bunching up that is happening 10, 20, 30 bikes ahead of you. So watch what's ahead. Know that there will be a slowing as soon as the race begins, and call it out as you brake, so you don't wind up having the person behind you get surprised and rear-ending you.
All right, tip number 4 of 7. You've got two right turns in the first 2 miles of this race. 2/3 of a mile into the ride, right after you pass the high school, there's a hard, fast right-hander with gravel invariably on the inside of that turn. People are going to want to dive right, trimming that corner. If you are on the far right side of the crowd, you can easily get pinched.
You can. Yep. And then 1.7 miles into the ride, by which time you've built up a real head of steam, right? Because you've been going downhill for a bit. There's another right turn. For both of these, the rules are the same. Yell it out, slowing, right turn. Don't be so close on the inside of that turn that you have nowhere to go if someone on your left dives a little too far right. Give yourself an exit path. Keep your speed the same as the crowd around you. Don't lock it up. Just, hold your line and hope that everyone else does as well. But give yourself a plan B at all times.
Yeah, let's reiterate that. Don't lock up your brakes no matter what. I mean, braking is fine. You're going to have to brake, but just modulate. Just a little scrubbing of speed will be all you need to do. You'll be riding on sandy soil all day. But this sand on the pavement is slick, and it's easy to slide out.
It is. I've seen it happen way too many times. Early in the race, people get a road rash that they have to spend the rest of the day with. And the sound of locked brakes makes other people panic brake. And then you've got a cascading mess on your hands.
Move up. This is tip number 5. Move up when you can. Move around or away from sketchy riders, and communicate your moves as you are moving through the pack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only thing I have to say on this are the corollaries. Don't move up when you can't. This is not a good place to take a gamble, which is a polite way of saying don't be one of those sketchy riders. And communicating your moves makes all the difference in the world. If you need to move in, point. If you see the trouble up ahead, call it out. Make sure everyone knows anything irregular that is going on around or in front or to the side of you.
I find that if I exude confidence as I'm doing this, and I've done this before, I've moved up. My first year I started at the back. I moved up easily 300 places just in these first few miles. If you know what you're doing, if you've raced some criteriums, if you exude some confidence, if you look like a solid bike handler, people are going to yield. They're going to let you in. That's what I've noticed the many years I've done it, is people will give you some space if you look like you know what you're doing. If you're being a fool, they're not. They're going to say, get out of here, get out of my way. Here's number 6. 3 miles in, the road levels off, and then you've got 3 turns and a railroad crossing. That sounds like an awful lot that's happening all at once, but even 3 miles, there's a lot more space around you than there was moments ago back up on 6th Street and certainly after that first right turn. That first right-hander is gentle, and you'll hardly even notice it.
Yep. And then a quick left takes you across the railroad tracks, and then seconds later, literally seconds later, a right turn onto the Jeep road, and that's when you can take a big deep breath because you have made it down the dreaded, well, not so dreaded, but it's certainly a little bit nerve-wracking Leadville 100 downhill pavement. And you're going to be grateful for this flat once you get to it. It's for the first time in minutes, you are not flying downhill in this, in the 10,000 foot morning air, freezing your butt off. Assuming it's not raining and there's not a wet fog, both of which I've experienced at the beginning of this race, this Jeep road is going to get you warmed up, and in a few minutes, you are not going to be shivering, and you probably won't be for the whole rest of the day.
Now, that gets us to tip number 7. You're finally on dirt, the Jeep road. It's narrower and slower than you might think. It's a little, as I recall, it's a little sandy. Right? In fact, when you first turn onto it, you and everyone else in the race have been funneled into a flat, narrow Jeep road here. There are a lot of places where puddles collect. If it's been raining that week, even if it's not, there's usually puddling here, and people are still jockeying for a better place in the pack. Question is now a good time for you to burn some matches and move up on this Jeep road?
Yeah, it's not an idle question at all, Hottie. The further up the field you are, the less crowding you have to deal with while climbing St. Kevin's, which is going to begin in just 2.5 miles from when you get onto dirt. If you are a very strong climber, and maybe you lost some places in the pavement descent because you're a smaller person and so just don't carry the momentum down the pavement the way some bigger riders might, it might be worth it for you to look for some openings now and jump from pack to pack. You can move up in this part of the race, but like anything in an all-day race, you have to decide whether it is worth the cost. There have been years when I've been on a single speed and so got moved pretty far back in the field by the time I hit the dirt. So it was worth it to go hard here on the flat so I could power up instead of walk up St. Kevin's in my big single speed gear. Other times, I've found it's better to hold a line, stay with a group, don't burn any matches, and plan just to kind of keep my place in line, saving those matches for later in the race when I really need them, and you will really need them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I hit the Jeep Road, I usually accept the position where I am. I go, okay, this is the spot. This is where I'm going to be, probably to the top of Kevin's, unless, I see somebody really messing up and I can move around. But on a geared bike, at this point, I'm trying to just settle in. Okay, here are my peeps. We're going to go over Kevin's with these people. So that takes us to about 6 miles into this 103.5 mile race and the beginning of the first climb, which is what we'll talk about next time on the course here on the Leadville Podcast.
Hottie, I want to talk about one of our sponsors for a second, Envy. The last time I rode a pair of non-Envy wheels at Leadville?
I'm guessing when Envy never existed?
Actually, I don't know about that. Envy had a different name before then. I think they've been around for a while, but yeah. I had to look it up myself. It was back in 2012, which means this will be my 6th contiguous year I've been on Envy wheels, and that is no accident. Several of those years have been on one pair of Envy wheels, my Envy XCs, which have been on my single speed for 5 years now. Guess how many times I've had to true the rims on those?
Well, I would think annually you would have to true any set of wheels.
I have never trued the rims on those Envy XCs. I've never, not even one time yet. No cracking, no truing, no anything. And it's not like I take these out of bubble wrap on race day either. These are my ride while training, ride in Moab, never take them off wheels. 5 years ago, it seemed like a lot of money for a set of wheels. Now they feel like the biggest bargain in my life.
So is that what you're riding this year?
No, I'm not riding the single speed this year. Oh. Those are staying on the single speed. This year I will be riding either a Felt Doctrine hardtail or a Specialized Epic S-Works at Leadville. Both of those bikes, as well as the Hammers Epic, have Envy's new M525 wheels. We are riding with super crazy low pressure with these, which gives us an amazing contact patch and trail feel, but we have not pinch flatted even once. 3 bikes, 0 flats this season. These wide hookless beads the M525 has are just amazing. We're riding with pretty beefy tires right now, two fours. We're riding with Connie X Kings. I forget exactly, but for Leadville, we're probably going to switch to some lighter weight tires. And I'm still not going to be concerned about pinch flatting with these. They are just the best feeling and riding wheels I have ever had. And I expect that, like with the XCs, I am going to be riding them for a very long time.
And of course, you can learn more about all of Envy's wheels and components, many of which seem like they're made with the Leadville 100 in mind, but which can pretty much handle anything you throw at them on any terrain. Just go to Envy, that's ENVE.com.
It is your women's champion, Rebecca Rush from Ketchum, Idaho. Welcome back, Rebecca.
Okay, Fatty, the 4-time Leadville Trail 100 champ, Rebecca Rush, is standing by. It's time for questions for the Queen.
Yeah, nobody knows and teaches endurance racing like 4-time Leadville 100 winner, Rebecca Rush. That's why we have this Questions for the Queen segment. Reba, welcome. It's great to talk with you again.
Thanks for having me back, Fatty. This has been really fun because I've been realizing how much I know about Leadville and what a cool event it is. It's been kind of fun going back in my brain archives to answer some of these questions.
So one very important question for the Queen today. How do you deal with cramps during a race?
I'll tell you one thing is that nobody's exempt from this. And cramps especially are not just nutritional based. A lot of people think, oh, eat bananas, I take more electrolyte, or whatever else. I've still gotten cramps in Leadville. I'm generally not a cramper at all. Mm-hmm. And almost every Leadville I've done, especially my 4 wins, I've experienced either a twinge or full-blown cramping. And so oftentimes people just, try to put more and more into their body because they think, okay, I got to deal with this nutritionally. And there is a nutritional way to tackle it. But keep in mind, cramping also comes when you have extreme volume and intensity that you're not used to. Yes. And I don't care how much you train, and this is for me included during my wins. You can be fully trained, ready to go, race ready for Leadville, and still cramp because often who goes out above 10,000 feet and does the kind of volume and intensity that you do on the race day for the Leadville Trail 100? Nobody, not me, not anybody else. And so it's often an intensity issue as well. We're going to talk about the nutritional part a little bit first, but then, ultimately, the sort of when you do get them or you feel them coming on, sometimes slowing down is really the answer. But we're going to go to nutrition first. So prevention is absolutely the best medicine, and electrolytes absolutely do help ward off cramps. I really like to, and full disclosure, I talked about GU in, I think, the last episode. I'm a GU athlete, but that's because I've done a lot of research. And I researched many different nutrition companies before I actually partnered with them. And their electrolyte tablets are pretty amazing. And my strategy for Leadville or any hard effort is I'm just taking those preventively, a couple an hour, a couple before, and then I just kind of stay on it as part of my nutrition plan. And I up the level if it's in higher temperatures. I'll take more electrolytes because you're sweating more, you're putting more strain on your body, and especially at an altitude like that. I also, in Leadville, mix my electrolyte drinks. And so if I have the choice of, one type of GU brew over, they have a double, I think their blueberry pomegranate is double, electrolyte. I'll elect for those for a really hard effort. And so I'm getting electrolyte in my drink, I'm getting it in tablet form, but really make it part of your nutritional sort of palette as you're planning for the race. I had one really funny story. I think it was 2011, my second Leadville win. I was cramping like crazy, and I'd never really experienced this before. And it was coming up that last pavement climb towards Carter Summit, that long last pavement climb. You've done power line. You're like, woohoo, I'm home. I'm on the pavement. I'm almost home. But there's still a lot of race left to go.
There is.
And it's really hot on that pavement climb towards Carter Summit. And it's a neutral aid station. There's like 5 people there, a bunch of volunteers. And I was cramping like crazy. And, I'm trying to use one leg, trying to use the other leg. And I rolled up to the aid station, and I had basically had nothing left. And I rolled up to the aid station. I'm like, I need electrolytes. And I'm in the lead, and I'm kind of spastic, and I'm shouting, and these volunteers are just looking at me really weird. I stop. I actually can't put my foot down because I go to unclip, and I cramp, of course. And so I fall over on my bike with my feet still clipped in, laying on the ground, writhing, going, I need electrolytes. And they're just staring at me. Like, I finally managed to, one woman like grabs my heel and unclips me from the bike. And I get up, and they're like looking around, frantically looking through the table, and they've kind of got nothing. They have watermelon, they have some other stuff, and she has a shaker of salt. And she's like, I have this. She's so proud. And I just like unscrew the top off the salt shaker, like knock it back, throw a little over my shoulder, and I go. And they were just staring at me like, what just happened? But I don't know how close, because Leadville, you don't get split. So I don't know how close the next person is. No. And so I do that, I blast off, and it totally worked. So I will say sometimes you just take what you can get. It's really great to plan all these really scientifically crafted things, but your body is telling you what it needs. And if that means grabbing a handful of potato chips, listen to your body. And what I find with salts is you try to plan for the first, 3/4 of the race. You're being really good about your nutrition plan. And then the last quarter, I feel like your body is really telling you what it wants. And so if you're craving sugar, grab a Red Bull. If you're craving salt, grab a handful of chips. Still take your regular nutrition and all that, but your body is really telling you what you've burned up and totally depleted, and often that will help with cramps. What also helped in that situation is I was at the top of the climb, and this is the strategy of how to deal with it, because the next part of the ride is really fun downhill down St. Kevin's. And so I was allowed to let my body rest a little bit. And this is how you tackle any of this stuff when you start to circle the drain, is you've got to slow down. Because what's happening is all the blood is in your legs and your extremities close to the skin, and you need to get it back towards your gut, towards your stomach, and in a place where it can be. And that only happens when you slow down. And so really, taking the time on a downhill to shake your legs out, get some nutrition in, and kind of get ready for the next uphill.
It is so hard to make yourself do that too, because you are in a race and you have the go, go, go mentality. To make yourself slow down so that you can keep going at all just doesn't fit in your head at that moment. So you have to prepare and be ready for that eventuality.
It takes mental discipline, absolutely, to slow and let people go. And it's happened to me every single race. I let people go, and then I see them again. And they're like, oh, here you are again. And I'm like, all right, see ya. And then I pass them because they didn't take care of themselves.
That's right. You got to take care of yourself.
Yeah, it's where you are at the finish line, not where you are 3/4 of the way through the race.
Reba, it's always great to get your insights.
Thanks, Fatty.
If you have questions for the Queen, leave them at Leadville100podcast.com. We'll get them to the Queen, to Rebecca Rush. You can also tweet them with the hashtag Leadville100podcast, or just give us a call. Text us, 719-453-1514. Again, I'm writing down notes, Fatty. Note to self, salt shaker in my jersey pocket for the next big ride. I think that's what I learned there.
Oh, that is a takeaway, I guess, that you could have, but it is super obvious. Rebecca Rush knows so much more about how to make smart decisions than just about anyone else. It's definitely worth checking out her Rush Academy. You can get days of pro experience download into your brain like this. Learn more at RebeccaRush.com. And bear in mind, there is a C in Rush, R-U-S-C-H. So when I was talking with Rebecca, I actually did learn something that was brand new to me, and that is slow down a little bit. When I am racing, it is so tough for me to dial it back. And last year, when you and I did the Crusher and the Tusher, going up the Col de Crush, as it's called, I was suffering hard from cramps in each of my calves, in my right and left calf simultaneously. I just suffered through it, not really thinking, if I dial it back a little bit, I might be able to go harder and better in a little while.
Mm-hmm. All right, Fatty, let's dig into this cramping issue a little bit more. And like Rebecca mentioned, a big part of avoiding cramps is what you put in your gut. And our good friends at The Feed can help you avoid cramps, as well as head them off at the pass when they do happen on race day. The Feed is a fantastic, convenient, and economical way to get the race day and training foods and drinks you need on an ongoing basis, so you know exactly what works for your gut.
Yeah, I have actually gotten over cramps before by using products that I got from The Feed. One in particular, pickle juice shots. I don't know if you have heard of those. Just little vials with the screw-on cap go right in your jersey. When you cramp, you unscrew it, drink it, and they give you that crazy heebie-jeebie feeling for a second. And then, I kid you not, I have had my cramps just go away right there. seriously, you got to check those things out. They are crazy, and they kind of hit you and make your head spin around a couple times, but they actually, at least for me, work. Have you ever tried those?
No, I've seen actually race promoters now starting to put out actual pickles at rest stops. So, I mean, obviously there is some proof behind this. It's not just a guessing game. How does it go down? The juice goes down mid-ride.
For one thing, it is something that is not sweet. And so I appreciate it just for that. For another thing, of course, like anything pickle-y, it's incredibly salty. And so maybe the sodium is giving you a hit too. But no, the flavor of concentrated pickle juice, because this is stronger than pickle juice that you get just out of a dill pickle bottle. It hits you pretty hard, and it wigs you out for a second, but that is kind of the point. I mean, there is a little bit of a soft reboot to this, and I have had my cramps just sort of vanish having used that before. It is worth that one moment of whoa when you do that.
All right, you can get pickle juice shots and a lot of other nutritional stuff.
That's right.
From our good friends at The Feed. Go to thefeed.com for more on nutrition planning for Leadville and all of your events and training. They have great expertise there at The Feed, our good friends at The Feed.
Yep.
Fatty, regarding this issue, this has been a big issue for us on this show, cramps. I consider myself very, very lucky. I have rarely had cramps during a race.
I guess I'm your counterbalance, Hottie. I cramp practically every endurance race. The pickle juice treatment I was talking about helps. I take electrolyte capsules, and those help. But I have had my quads and calves just take turns, 2 at a time, just fully locking up on me. So painful. Mm-hmm.
They are. They're really painful. So to help folks maybe better understand how to prevent them, let's kind of define what a cramp is. And again, the science is still out on this stuff. They're still trying to kind of hack why people get cramps and how to stop them. But here's basically what's happening. A cramp is an involuntary and forcibly contracted muscle that does not relax. In other words, it contracts, but it doesn't let go. Any muscle can spasm, but a full-on cramp usually occurs in the muscles we control, especially the legs, like quads, hams, calves. These are called true cramps. True cramps includes the ones that occur during activity, aka the Leadville Trail 100, or because of injury, at rest, or while sleeping. Those are actually called nocturnal cramps. Those are the ones I get mostly. Usually I get my cramps once I've finished a day's event, hard ride, I'm laying on the couch, suddenly my body seizes up. Usually it's a calf or a quad cramp. There are also these other bizarre cramps. I thought I'd throw this in here real quick. There are also what they call tetany cramps. That's like a full body spasm.
Wow.
And finally, I know, that would be awful to have happen anytime, especially on a bicycle. Finally, there are what they call dystonic cramps, which usually affect a smaller muscle group like eyelids or the larynx or jaw. Very bizarre. But again, cramping can just be almost a debilitating and certainly a race-stopping thing that can happen to any rider at any time. As Rebecca just said, Rebecca's one of the most fit women in the world on a bicycle, and she is susceptible to cramps.
Causes still cramps all the time.
Yeah, causes have been a guessing game. Muscle overuse is the biggie. I mean, generally what's going on here is you're using your muscles a lot, you're firing them, and at some point they just go, oh, for God's sakes, really? Another time? That's it. You've used me too much. I'm going to stop. And I'm going to do one more contraction, and I'm not going to let go. And that's what a muscle overuse is, cramping due to muscle overuse. There's dehydration. That certainly has some merit. Low sodium. Rebecca talked about the salt shaker. I love that. Calcium, magnesium, or potassium, low levels of those 3 electrolytes can also be at the root of a cramp. A muscle that's poorly trained, that's just not up to the task.
Yep.
I mean, that's a
biggie.
That can cause a cramp. Most cramps can be stopped if the muscle can be stretched. Now, that's a big problem for us. If you're in the middle of the Leadville Trail 100 and you're looking up at the power line climb and you're having a cramp, stopping means losing time or just losing the event altogether.
Yeah, I don't even know how many times going up power line, get a cramp, and I will use that actually as an opportunity to get rid of the cramp while still moving. You get off the bike, and I'm pushing while leaning far forward to stretch out my calf, and that works great. And then I throw my leg back over the bike, and as it is going over the top tube, bam, all of a sudden the cramp is right back there and you're worse off than you were in the first place because now you can't even get rolling again. So, man, cramps, they just mess you up so bad.
They do. So let's go over some solutions. This is some hacks that Fatty and I both experimented with over the years. Again, I don't have a huge issue with this. I've helped other people who have. I've read plenty on this topic. Now, as Rebecca talked about and alluded to, I mean, obviously your nutrition and what you're putting in your gut does have a direct effect on how well your muscles are firing. And there's been a lot of recent research done by this. The folks at Scratch certainly got going by clearing up athletes' guts and hence improving their hydration. Stacy Sims was also involved in that project to get athletes moving and firing better. And what they found was there's a kind of an ideal solution you should have in your bottles. They found that 20 to 25 grams of carbs per 20 ounce of water is about the right amount to achieve proper hydration, yet keep your gut happy. So that's 20 to 25 grams or about 80 to 90 calories for a standard size bottle. That's the proper solution to keep hydration at good levels. Anything beyond that, if you start to get too carb heavy, too sugar heavy in your fluids, then your gut has a negative reaction and it starts pulling water from other areas of your body, like your muscles and your blood system, to deal with the amount of sugar in your gut. Salt is another big one. Dr. Stacy Sims, who I've exchanged many emails with over on this issue, she thought that 300 to 400 milligrams, her research showed, of sodium per 20. I don't know what that equates to in salt shaker shakes down the mouth, as Rebecca told us about. But Dr. Sims found 300 to 400 milligrams of sodium per 20 ounce bottle of water is about what you should look for. Magnesium. So when muscles fire, generally what's happening is you're using magnesium to contract the muscle. It's the other way around. Calcium is used as you contract. Magnesium is what gets used to release that muscle. What is a cramp? A cramp is a muscle failing to release. So there is some anecdotal evidence that low magnesium levels can lead to cramps. In other words, because your magnesium levels are low, whatever muscle that's fatigued and needs magnesium to release is just not achieving that because you might be a little low on magnesium. Magnesium is lost in sweat, in fact, profusely. It'll just come right out of you as you sweat. So I helped out a particular athlete at Leadville, in fact, who was having a lot of problems with cramps. I suggested maybe he try magnesium in training. He didn't. He tried it like 5 days before race day. He took plenty of it. He actually went out and had a really good day, and he was very thankful that I gave him the tip. I don't know if that was all of his issues, but certainly it did work for him. A little added magnesium in capsule form. It also shows up in lots of good foods. Leafy greens have a lot of magnesium. So if you're on a good diet, chances are you're getting enough magnesium. Just remember, you're sweating a lot of it out. Well-trained muscles, just having good balance, good well-trained muscles that are up to the task of what you're about to put them through. Again, muscle overuse is kind of the underlying theme here. So you just want to make sure you have a good balanced body, that your calves and your quads and your hammies are all firing and working and well-trained so they can handle this task, because it's a tough one on the muscles.
Oh, it sure is. So I have your third one is kind of my first one, but I have 3 strategies that hew pretty closely to what you and Reba were saying: training, staying ahead of the game, and being ready for emergencies. First of all, training. I tend to cramp when I am racing beyond what I prepared to do. It is so easy to want to go harder on race day than what you ever trained to do during training. So if I've been going longer than I prepared for, or I'm in heat that I'm not ready for, the answer is there is no shortcut. You've got to train into the volume and with the intensity that you're going to bring to the race. And then you've got to be honest to that. You've got to stick with what you are actually capable of doing. You go harder than you prepared for, you will pay for it before you get to the finish line. Second thing, be prepared. That is, stay ahead of the game. If I take electrolyte capsules at the starting line, at the same time I am getting a couple hundred calories into my mouth, I'm also getting 4 electrolyte capsules into my mouth. And I have my crew have more out, another 4 at each of the aid stations I stop with, along with water to wash them down so it's easy. These aren't to stop cramps, but to hopefully prevent them. And then third, be ready for emergencies. I have the pickle juice I just talked about in my middle jersey pocket. I also have a tube of about a dozen electrolyte capsules in that same pocket. If I start to have a cramp, if I feel a cramp coming on, because it's rare that you get hit by a full-blown one right at the beginning, I break that emergency glass, so to speak. I wash down a half dozen of electrolyte capsules with a shot of pickle juice, and it sounds gross, but it has worked for me multiple times. And I have saved other people on not the Leadville course, but on other courses with the same treatment, giving them my stash and hoping that I wasn't going to need them. Cramps are no fun. Being ready for them and training so that you don't get them is really the best solution.
You make me really glad. I am frequently get cramps, especially on the bike. Didn't you try the hot shot too for a while, the spicy mix, right?
I did. I was an early adopter of hot shots and was pretty excited about them, to be honest. I don't use that anymore. I don't have anything against it, but it seems to me what works both for pickle juice and with the hot shots is the intensity and the surprising hotness or strength of the flavor tends to kind of shock your nerves into letting go of the cramp. Mm-hmm. And
I
with hot shots...
I used the hot shot once when I was having one of my post-ride cramps, and it actually worked. And now, I don't, like you, I had not used it, unlike you, I had not used it a lot, so it was new to me, and I think that helps because spice is usually something you get, a little accustomed to over time.
Yeah, and that was the issue with me. Hot shots worked for me a couple of times, and after that, I was kind of like, this isn't as strong as most of the food I eat. Mm-hmm. And so it didn't really faze me, or it didn't give me the jolt that I needed in order to kind of forget the cramp, I guess. Pickle juice, strong pickle juice, it seems to never go away. I mean, it's practically like taking a swig of vinegar. Or I know people who eat strong, like spicy mustard, has kind of the same effect. There is an effect of a jolt that seems to let a cramp go, at least temporarily. And any moment you can have without a cramp is pretty much worth the spend.
Hey, Fatty, on a future episode, we should go over what you have in your seat pack. But more importantly, you want to make sure you have a seat bag, and you want to make sure it holds on to your seat rails.
Yep. I always have a seat pack, always. Road or mountain, I know I've got CO2, I've got a tube, I've got a valve, I've got a tire lever, and they are not in my jersey pocket because during an endurance race, those pockets are full already, and I don't need another thing banging around on my back. For the last 12 years in the Leadville 100, it's always been a Banjo Brothers bag. I have a deluxe seat bag, a mini, a small, expanding, medium. They're simple bags, and they're great. They hold the tools that you need and the stuff that you need, and they're just great little seat bags. They don't need to be super fancy. They just do their job. And
they stay on, which is...
They do.
I mean, on the Leadville course, you will see all kinds of debris on that course. Mm-hmm. A lot of tire levers and CO2 and seat bags dropped, but it won't be a Banjo Brother. Banjo Brothers, they hold on to your seat rails well, and that's what you're going to need come race day. Banjo Brothers, tough, practical, and affordable. They're Minneapolis-based, in business since 2003. Their products are available in your finer local bike shops that is, or to get 15% off your order, go to banjobrothers.com/fatty favorites. I just ordered a frame pack doing that. It's great.
Yep. Make sure that's fatty-favorites. banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites. And one last thing, while there are 2 guys in Banjo Brothers, Mike and Eric, they are not actually brothers. I got that wrong in episode 1.
Ooh, scandalous.
Yes, scandalous.
As of recording time, we are just over 11 weeks till race day for the Leadville Trail 100, which is no doubt spiking at least some of our listeners' heart rates.
Oh, yeah, no question about that. I think I might have skipped a beat or two when you said that, in fact. Luckily, we've got Coach Jonathan Lee of Trainer Road to keep our training on fleek. Jonathan, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Eldon. Thank you.
Glad to have you here. So we are at T-minus 11 plus weeks for this race. Are you getting nervous?
Yeah, I think the nerves started a long time ago.
We're at 11 plus weeks for the race. What should people be focusing on right now?
It's still about like what we talked about last time, where you're going to be, extending those durations from sweet spot on. But at this point, you're probably getting a good indicator of how you're doing with those sort of efforts. Something that I find a lot of people misunderstand about sweet spot is, number one, the name. It's a big misnomer. It's far from sweet. It's really difficult.
It is painful. It's what it is.
And if it's not difficult, then you're not doing it right.
Yep.
It should feel extremely tough, but it should feel like you're sitting just below that line, where you feel like, oh man, lactic acid, or that sensation that we normally assimilate with lactic acid, is really building up, right? So at this point, you're probably getting a good indication of where you're at in terms of your abilities around that intensity. It's honestly, at this point, one thing that I find is that if you can't extend the duration of these intervals, you might want to look at just, instead of extending the duration, maybe cutting the rest between them a little bit shorter. It's really, the goal that we're going for is just more time at a specific intensity. And we have to step our body into that in the way that our body, at least can support. We definitely stretch the body's limits, but at the same time, you can't ask it to do something impossible. So if you find yourself in this situation right now, you're really going to want to focus on extending the duration. So whether that's by eliminating rest in between, or by just making those intervals a little longer.
Mm-hmm. So not everyone does intervals or is super comfortable with even the concept of intervals. To be honest, until last year, except for when I was doing my Trainer Road workouts, I don't think I did any intervals outside at all. So give us a little bit more detail on what you mean here.
Yeah, I think that let's go to the rest intervals. I know that sounds weird, but okay. So an interval workout is basically a workout with structure. And in most cases, there's a work interval, and then that's offset directly thereafter by a rest interval. And those usually interchange. Intervals, and when they're in a group, they make up a set of intervals. It's pretty straightforward stuff, right? So as let's say that you have like a good sweet spot type of workout is, let's say that you are doing 10-minute sweet spot intervals, right? So you're doing 10 minutes, that's your work interval at sweet spot intensity. So that's, once again, that's somewhere around 88, 92% or roughly around there of threshold. Or like we said, that feeling where you're just below that line where you feel like you're going to blow up. So you're there for the work interval. And then thereafter, let's say that you're resting for 5 minutes, okay? And then after that, you go back and you work at 10 minutes again. Then you might rest for 5 minutes. And you might do that something like, 4 times in an hour-long workout. So that means you're doing 40 minutes of work out of 60 minutes. It's a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's a good way to get in a lot of high-quality work into a short amount of time. And to be honest, I know that there are plenty of folks that have all the time in the world to train, but even if you have all the time in the world to train, that doesn't mean that you can get more out of that time that you have. That just means that you have more time. But what we're really talking about is efficiency. And you can really bring about a lot of improvement in a short amount of time. But the main thing that I find is a lot of people are familiar with work intervals, and a lot of us, we tend to just go out and chase Strava segments, So that's our interval, we say, and then we say, okay, well, I'll turn around and I'll go back for it again. But we're really flexible on that rest. We give ourselves as much time as we need to on the rest. And I think that people aren't strict enough with the rest part of the intervals. And I mean that in 2 ways. Number one, should be resting intensity, meaning that you aren't working almost as hard. Number two, it should be very, very tight on time. It doesn't have to be short. If you have five minutes to rest for 5 minutes. Don't rest for 5 minutes and 10 seconds. Don't rest for 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Because if you're doing that and you have a properly structured workout, all the ones that, we put a ton of work to make sure that our workouts are structured properly in Trainer Road. So if you are cutting your rest intervals short or anything else, you've either gotten faster or you aren't following a properly structured workout. So, and I think that a lot comes from that, because when you're in a race, a lot of the time people don't wait and ask you, are you ready to go hard again? They don't ask you that. They just go. So in that situation, it's a really good help, because many times you'll find that you'll make perhaps just as many gains by making sure that you're strict with your rest intervals as being strict with your work intervals.
Good stuff. Bottom line it for us. What should people be working on this week?
At this point, you're going to want to be just stretching that intensity once again. So I think you're still in sweet spot intensity. You're not going to be stepping up into that harder stuff, into the threshold stuff yet, but you're getting there. So get familiar with it. It's going to be a while.
All right. Jonathan Lee, one of the coaches at trainerroad.com, a program that I have gotten a ton of value from. It is basically coincides with my starting to get sub-9s at Leadville. A perfect coincidence? Absolutely not. Other things contributed, but definitely this was a big part of it.
It was your hard work. That's for sure.
So. For sure I worked hard, but having structure makes a big difference. This is a race where just going out and having done long rides all summer doesn't quite do the trick.
True story.
Jonathan, we'll see you at the start line.
Thanks, Eldon.
Since episode 1 of this podcast, I've been doing some repenting, and I've been taking my sweet spot training a lot more seriously. I've been hitting the intervals pretty religiously, but it's like Jonathan can see inside my mind, because I have been letting those rest intervals go way too long. And it is definitely time for me to tighten those up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I looked up the word interval once, and inevitably the definition came back to the time in between the work. That's the interval, and that's the important bit almost, is how much rest are you giving yourself before you go at it again. Check out trainerroad.com for in-depth training plans and info, and you'll find their podcast there too.
That's right. And Jonathan is also the host of the MTB podcast, where he just did a really nice NPR documentary-style episode on Bentonville, Arkansas. It is for sure worth a listen. It made me want to go riding out there.
Fatties, we put the wraps on this one. We'd like to remind everyone that this podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and the home website, Leadville100podcast.com. Subscribing, rating, and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts keeps this podcast going.
That's right. And if you're enjoying this podcast, tell your friends. If you have ideas or suggestions, head over to the website's comment section. Let us know. If you've got a question for the Queen or for Jonathan or for us, leave us a voicemail or text at 719-453-1514. Good luck in your training. Check your feed for a new episode each Tuesday, and we'll see you at the finish line.